It's John Bush with Live Free Now, number 186, bringing you the news, views, tips, and tools you can use to live a free, prosperous, and healthy life. I'm here at Radical Roots Ranch, our 10-acre homestead, and this is Thanksgiving week, so happy Thanksgiving, everybody. For this week's show, I'm going to be playing the video from a speech I gave at Monerotopia, which took place in Mexico City. It was a conference dedicated to the world's most private cryptocurrency. I'm a big fan of it. Try to use it as much as I can. Monerotopia was a great event. Gave a talk about leaving a legacy of liberty, exiting the beast system, leveraging the private realm, and building the Confederation of freedom communities. I hope you guys will enjoy this talk. Before we play the talk, let me give a quick shout out to our sponsors. Big thanks to Hakeem Anwar over at Above Phone. They have a huge Black Friday sale going on. So depending on when you're listening to this, the Black Friday sale is going to kick off this Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving, and go through Monday. There's actually extra special deals that I've secured for Live Free Academy, the Live Free Academy community, and Live Free Now listeners. So if you want to get the scoop on those, go to livefree.academy/newsletter. Join our email newsletter, livefree.academy/newsletter, to be the first to hear about it. I also want to thank Jonathan England's Off-Grid Dream Life. He's got this incredible webinar. It's coming up December 4th in the evening. Follow the links in the show notes to join that free webinar all about opting out of the beast system, building eco-villages. He also gives you an extra special invite to spend some time and to check out the eco-village he's built down in Costa Rica. And finally, special shout out to Christian Yordanov of the Live Longer formula. He's doing a free consult to help you get your health in line. It's like 30-45 minutes, totally free with Christian, where he'll ask you a bunch of questions about your health, about what's ailing you, and help you to craft a personalized strategy to overcome those issues. Follow the link in the show notes to join that consultation. All right, thanks to the sponsors, and thanks to all the listeners. Appreciate you guys. Share the podcast with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to your favorite podcast catcher, and enjoy the talk I gave at Monerotopia. Peace. Good morning.
Morning.
How is everybody?
Awesome.
Yeah. Great. Cheers. I'm still waking up. Okay. All right, well, I'm going to pay attention to that clock. So, all right, my name is John Bush. I hail from Texas. Yeehaw. And today I want to talk about my journey from politics and protesting and a reactionary paradigm to exit and build strategy, overcoming limiting beliefs, aligning with my divine purpose, and I want to share my vision for the Confederation of freedom communities, which is how I think we can get from here, statism, technocracy, tyranny, to there, a genuinely free society where we can spend our time philosophizing by the river and not debating how we're going to dismantle the corrupt state apparatus. And I do want to spend some time too, I think what I have to offer this community, both folks still trying to find their footing, find their place, and leaders, entrepreneurs, visionaries, is helping us to really identify our limiting beliefs and those thoughts that are holding us back from taking our activism, our work, our lives to the next level. So I'm going to be mixing in some of the work of Napoleon Hill as I share my talk, and so yeah, let's roll. So I've been doing this freedom thing for 22 years now, so that's more than half of my adult life. I've been concerned with how do we upset this nightmare tyranny. Some would call it the New World Order, others call it the predator class. But when I woke up in 2002 after catching a documentary by old Alex Jones, you guys watching all the drama with them trying to take away his program? They did like $1 billion judgment, and then they had trustees and they were about to sell it to The Onion, which is really dastardly, right? The Onion apparently bought the InfoWars, and the reason why I think they did is so fast forward 10 or 20 years, everyone will think the InfoWars content was satire, right? Some of it does seem like satire, but so woke up from that documentary and just really was kind of alarmed at what was going on with problem, reaction, solution, false flag terrorism. Started trying to wake people up, red pilling people, as they call it, and found that a lot of people didn't really care. And learned about Ron Paul and libertarianism, got involved in the 2008 presidential campaign. And that really was like, oh, there's a political home for me, right? You guys are Ron Paul folks, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The cool thing is because Ron Paul was like ideologically pure in the message he put out, he created this massive movement. And while he didn't do well politically, he spurred a lot of people and created a whole lot of seeds and planted a whole lot of seeds and got a lot of people active and involved still to this day. And of course, those folks evolved in large part towards voluntarism and agorism. You contrast that with some of the politicos that win, and really all they do is just take the seat of power and ultimately get corrupted themselves. So I found out along the way that politics is not the answer. Started a political action committee in 2010 with a handful of folks, and this really was a big eye-opener for me that alternative institutions, building the parallel economy, what we now call exit and build strategy is the way. We were actually pretty good at politics. We managed to stop police officers from being trained to do blood withdrawals in the city of Austin. So they were going to train the cops to pull people over and do blood withdrawals and you know, do like they were going to be phlebotomists on the side of the road if they suspected you of a DWI. So we dressed up like vampire cops and paraded around downtown and handed all these flyers out. We ended up getting an ordinance passed that stopped the police officers from being trained to do blood withdrawals. So it was like, yeah, big victory. We spent all this time, all this energy. It was kind of fun actually. But turns out they just did the blood withdrawals with a nurse at the jail, right? And they would get a court order, like an overnight faxed court order. So it seemed like a victory, when in all reality, we were just making government slightly a little more tolerable. Another effort was with these fusion centers, where they collect information, they share intelligence amongst local, state, and federal law enforcement. It's been kind of a mind trip to see how far advanced the surveillance state has come from the early days when the Department of Homeland Security came out after all the 9/11 treachery. But these fusion centers would collect information, and it turns out they were collecting information on activists and Ron Paul people. We learned about the Missouri Information Analysis Center. They had a report called the Modern Militia Movement, and it was like, you might be dealing with a militia member, which would be a threat, right, to law enforcement, if they have Ron Paul bumper stickers, or end the Fed, or abolish the IRS. And so imagine, a cop pulls someone over and they think they're dealing with somebody that's about to bust out an AR-15 or something. Anyway, that was a big eye-opener. These fusion centers, they're all around the country. And so they started to pop one up in Austin, the Austin Regional Intelligence Center. And I remember the first time I heard about it, the chief at the time, Art Acevedo, he was doing a press conference, and he's like, yeah, we'll have the technology to have cameras that can analyze in real time if people are gathering together in a large group about to do something. Oh man, it's just wild how that technology is now completely advanced. It's all in our pocket and analyzing all the algorithms and everything we say. But long story short, we pushed back on this fusion center, and through the city of Austin, we insisted that they have a privacy policy that says you can't collect information of a political, religious, or social view. It has to be a suspicion of a crime. So we're like, yeah, another victory. And then later, the Texas Motorcycle Rights Association contacted us. They're like bikers, and they represent biker clubs, because the Department of Public Safety was pulling them over and taking pictures of their insignia and their tattoos and putting it in a state fusion center database. So they had mass influence at the state level, and we ended up pushing through a bill that had those same privacy policy provisions for all the fusion centers in Texas. You can't collect information of a political, religious, or social view. Victory, yeah, we did it. Well, fast forward several years, and there was a leak from an anonymous hacker group, and it turns out that my name and Derek's name were in this Fusion Center database for hosting a Freedom Cell meetup. So the point that I want to make is, first of all, federal politics, national politics is completely corrupt. The system is operating exactly as it was intended to operate, and for us to think that we can change that, I believe, is a bit naive. Even though people say that means that you're black-pilled, that just simply fails to recognize that there's other methods for pursuing freedom besides just politics. State and local activism, some people say, hey, let's give that a try. But what I came to realize was that instead of creating more freedom for ourselves, we were merely slowing the growth of tyranny. And that was unsatisfactory, because we're all trying to create a world where we can live our lives according to our own ends, right? And so that's where this whole idea of taking responsibility for creating freedom into our own hands came about. And that's the genesis of this exit and build concept, right? Derek Rose put it out in his book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, Exit and Build. Exit that which you disbelieve in and build new systems, right? And so a huge piece of that is alternative currencies. Of course, that's what we're talking about here at Monerotopia. So early on, before I learned about Bitcoin, we were going to farmers markets and encouraging people to use silver dimes, using alternative currencies, barter. You know, silver dimes in the States were 90% silver, 1964 and earlier, dimes, half dollars, back when there was still a semblance of sound money. And so it's like, well, we got it. If we want to end the Fed, we can't pass a resolution or audit the Fed. We should limit our use of Federal Reserve notes, right? Yeah, and ultimately, I don't know that that's necessarily going to end the Fed, but at least if we can carve out our own pocket, our own counter economies, then we can at least not contribute to that, which is great. So that was before I learned about Bitcoin. Learned about Bitcoin in 2011, and there was a guy that was like, hey, you should mine Bitcoin. You can do it on your laptop. You get 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes or so if you solve a block. And here's a big lesson. I remember telling him distinctly, like, yeah, I just don't, I'm not interested in that, but I don't have time to really figure it out. Let me do some research first. So that was a lesson for me that I take still to this day, that we should always try to have the mental capacity or the CPU available to take advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself. But oftentimes, and this is medicine for myself too, we're so overwhelmed, we got so much going on, we're not able to see the forest for the trees always. So missed that opportunity, and then I remember it must have been 2012 or maybe 2012 or so. It's like Bitcoin went from $20 or $30 to $80. I was like, I'm gonna wait to get in until it comes back down to 20 or 30, which is funny because people still say that, you know, oh, it's up to 60,000, but it just was 25. I gotta wait. That's why dollar cost average is important. But the funny thing is that early on in the Bitcoin movement, Amir Taki was saying this last night. Were y'all here for his talk? That was incredible. What a revolutionary. I tweeted, Amir Taki makes us all look like Michael Saylor. He's so radical. So the thing about Bitcoin is early on, we're like, it's gonna end the Fed. Bitcoin, we see the hope, we see the potential, we see the technology, it's uncontrollable, uncensorable, it's anonymous. That's what we used to think back in the day. Of course, the Silk Road case really opened our eyes to that. It's gonna end the Fed. Well, I think we very much underestimated our enemy, because fast forward to the present day, and the Federal Reserve Bank they have plans to issue their own central bank digital currency. Not only that, but if you're familiar with Roger Ver's work with hijacking Bitcoin, they've in large part co-opted the essence, the radical roots of the Bitcoin project, right? It used to be about peer-to-peer electronic cash, upsetting the system, and now it's about storing value, building wealth, and there's all sorts of chicanery going on with all that. But let me get into this exit and build strategy thing and how I believe we can go from here to there. And I want to encourage people to think big, and instead of thinking in terms of the next election or the next altcoin season or the next bull market, we need to be thinking generationally. We need to be asking ourselves, how do our actions in the present moment affect the future generations that are yet to come? And we need to have a bigger picture thing, right? So I largely see our enemies that we're dealing with as this predator class, the shadow government, the Bilderbergs, the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, the big banks. And they have long-term, big picture plans to roll out this tyranny and this technocracy. One of the biggest concerns that they're rolling out is what's called technocracy. You guys are familiar with this. I'm really excited to see this term so prevalent here at this conference. But there's 4 key pieces of technology that I'm concerned with when it comes to technocracy. And I'll share how exit and build strategy can help to upset that and overcome that. The first piece is digital ID. And the digital ID is rolling out rapidly. And I doubt there's a whole lot of Trump folks in this audience, but maybe for folks that are watching from home or the recording, the way that this predator class works is they use problem, reaction, solution in order to get people to do things that they wouldn't have normally supported. For example, with all this border crisis going on, Donald Trump in his first administration was actually pushing for surveillance with an entry-exit system with digital ID and biometric surveillance. So if you fly out of the States, and most other countries, I actually saw it here in Mexico for the first time flying in, there's like this turnstile that you go through, and there's these pictures that you're asked to take. Now thankfully you can still opt out. I hope you guys are opted out. I don't know, when I came into the airport in Mexico City, there's a huge line, totally inconvenient. Then there's these really efficient, and there's no line at all going through those little cattle pens. So I hope you guys didn't take the convenient route and go through and scan your picture. Although if you have a passport, you already have a biometric picture that you've given up to the man, but I guess it's the principle of the matter. I chose to stand in the long ass line with all the other foreigners. Anyway, that in the US was put forward by Donald Trump. There's also now like all sorts of facial recognition at the border. So there's these false heroes that are still part of this problem, reaction, solution paradigm. So digital ID is a big piece of it. It's already well advanced. There's the ID.me. Last time I was gonna go mess with my taxes in 1040, I wanted to go check in on the past 1040s and stuff, and it's like the only way to log into that service is the ID.me. So I never did log in, and I never did call to figure that stuff out. I hate dealing with the IRS, it's the worst. But maybe Trump will abolish the IRS and end the Fed, even though he leveraged the Fed to inflate the currency by 40% and massively rack up the debt. So digital ID is a piece of it. Of course, central bank digital currencies are a big piece of it, and a huge deception that's currently taking place, and what we need to watch out for and be aware of and talk to people about is how Trump, another misdirection. We're gonna ban CBDCs, we're gonna put forward a bill to ban CBDCs, but really what's gonna happen, if you guys are familiar with the work of Whitney Webb, it's solid research. She really uncovers a lot, even though her essays are like entire books in themselves, but there's a lot of good work there. But ultimately what's taking place is this shadow government, Bilderberg, Peter Thiel, big finance, big tech, it's like an alternative deep state. They are pushing forward the same agenda for transparent, censorable, centralized, programmable money. Right, those are key elements of a CBDC, as we heard from Aaron Day's talk. They're pushing that forward, but really through dollar-backed stablecoins, like Tether, for example. So again, not everything is always as it seems. CBDC is a big piece of it. The other piece is the vaccine passport. And really the vaccine passport is a technology that's all about controlling people's freedom of movement. Vaccines were merely the first application. What I believe this technology is likely going to be used for is it's going to be tied with a personal carbon allowance, a PCA. That's what the World Economic Forum is putting forward. They even have a program called MyPass. It's like a little vaccine passport software. That'll integrate with the carbon output that you're allowed to have. And of course, if you check out Whitney's work as well, it's all about this carbon credit, carbon finance, tokenizing and securitizing all the resources in the world. I think that's a huge piece of it, and that's something that we really need to be aware of. And then again, with Trump, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but it's on a lot of people's minds. A lot of the Republicans and a lot of the people backing him, especially Larry Fink of BlackRock, they're all pushing to tokenize and do all this weird carbon credit, environmental finance nonsense. So just really to underscore that politics isn't the solution. We shouldn't rest on our laurels. We shouldn't become complacent. So the fourth piece is social credit score, of course. Tying everything in with the algorithms, all the big tech phones, all the software, all of the social media posts. And hopefully it doesn't get as bad as China and jaywalking and all that nonsense. But these are the four horsemen of the technocratic apocalypse, as I like to call them. So what do we do to push back? Well, pushing back on full frontal pushback through the government is obviously not the way. What we can hope to do is identify areas in our lives where we're vulnerable to their control. I call this the exit and build self-assessment. And with Live Free Academy, it's a company I started in 2021. We help people to create greater freedom. We help people to leverage exit and build strategy to live a life of their dreams, really, to become more free, more prosperous, more in alignment with their divine purpose. And so we teach people to go through and ask yourself, like, is all of my income coming from Social Security? Is all of my income coming from a 401k or an IRA? Do I have a side hustle? Do I have alternative investments that are unconfiscatable outside of the system? How many people do I know in my local area that can get my back and support me? Am I growing my own food? What percentage of my food comes from a centralized source that is vulnerable to supply chain collapse? Right? These are all the questions we ask ourselves. And then what I encourage people to do is identify those areas which you're most vulnerable. So for example, if somebody's retired and all their income is coming from Social Security, they could find themselves in a difficult situation if that Social Security gets converted over to CBDCs, and now all of a sudden, in order to use the CBDC system, you have to be up to date on your inoculations, or perhaps you have to not exceed a certain carbon output for your household. It's kind of ridiculous even talking through this stuff, but this is the world that we're going towards. This is the world that many people are going towards. We're not going that way. We're going to show another path forward. And so identify that area and then lean into that area. And then we have an accelerator membership with our company, Live Free Academy, and we help people to create goals and create what we call an activation plan so they can actually step through decoupling oneself from the beast system. And when it comes to exit and build strategy, I like to think of it in terms of a household path. So we're exiting and building in our own lives. We're exiting and building in our own household. We're identifying ways that we can build wealth outside the system. We're identifying ways to decouple from the technocracy, big tech, using encrypted communication, whatever it may be. And that's one piece of it. And that's fundamental, and that's the most important. We need to, like we're on an airplane, of course the oxygen masks come down. You're instructed to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. So let us try to do everything we can to become as independent as possible in our own lives. But let's not stop there. And this is the great thing about this conference. There's this activist heart here that isn't really present in other cryptocurrency conferences. It kind of got dwindled away, unfortunately. The energy here at this conference is very much like the original energy in the Bitcoin community, where people were anti-state, anti-authoritarian, trying to do what we could to leverage this technology to create a better world. It's since gone all number go up, but there's exit and build household strategy, and then there's this broader strategy, which I like to call exit and build meta strategy. So the first step is to identify where we're susceptible to the state's control, to the technocracy's control, and try to work our way out of that. The next piece is to gather with other freedom lovers, to work together through communities like the Freedom Cell Network, and ultimately the vision that I have for how we get from here to there, which ultimately could take generations, is to create what I like to call the Confederation of Freedom Communities. So the idea is, as we're exiting and building in our own lives and our own households, we're connecting with other people that are doing the same, and we're beginning to form our own counter-economy. You guys are familiar with the work of Samuel Edward Konkin III? He wrote this great book called The New Libertarian Manifesto, and he lays out it's more of a strategy, it's a philosophy and a strategy of agorism. Agora is the Greek word for open air market. And the epitome of an open air market is taking place right outside. How cool is that? I hope you guys are spending your Monero out there with those folks. That's the good stuff. So many great wares too. And the Mexicanos are like great salespeople. So you go to a farmer's market in the States or in Austin, and people are just twiddling their thumbs on their phone and you just walk past. But they're like, you wanna try? And you're like, no, really, you should try. I love that. Anyway, agorism is open air market, and it's this idea that if we want to create the free society, we need to do our absolute best to live in alignment with the philosophy of liberty, which it's not always easy to live free in an unfree world. We should take proactive steps where we can. And he lays out this idea of a counter-economy, counter-economics. And that's trading outside the system, under the table, in black and gray markets. Black markets being those activities which are expressly prohibited by the state. Gray markets being those activities which require consent or agreement by the state. And so try to work outside, under the table. Another broader definition of counter-economic activity is anything that evades or defies the state. It's counter-economic. So connect with your neighbors, trade with one another, use alternative currencies like Monero. But let's not stop with Monero, because I teach a lot of people how to use cryptocurrency and onboard a lot of folks, especially older folks that aren't really comfortable with technology. And the objection that often comes up is, what happens if the internet goes down? Here's a quick bit on limiting beliefs, because I want to make sure to work that stuff in. oftentimes when I hear people, when we're like, hey, wouldn't it be great if there was this alternative cryptocurrency that would allow us to trade together outside of the system, and there's nothing the government can do to stop that? Isn't that something you'd be interested in, right? I'm like, well, we have that. It's called Monero. It's called Bitcoin, right? Except for the transparency piece. And a lot of people, their first instinct is, oh, well, that could never work. Or, oh, well, what if they shut the internet down? Or it could get hacked. Ultimately, what I think that is, on the surface level, is this excuse, but deeper rooted, and let us try to identify this within ourselves whenever we bring up limiting beliefs and objections. I think it's a deeper limiting belief that a lot of people aren't comfortable with technology, or perhaps they feel intimidated by learning some big new complex thing that's pretty challenging to wrap your head around. So rather than sit with that, oh, I've struggled with technology in the past, this young man is encouraging me to learn this new technology, and I feel uncomfortable with that. In fact, I feel a little bit of anxiety because I lost a password or I did this or that. Let us identify those limiting beliefs and work through them, because ultimately it's these limiting beliefs that are holding us all back from greatness. None of us are living up to our full potential. None of us are taking actions in alignment with the divine creativity that lies within each and every one of us. And the biggest thing that's holding us back isn't the New World Order, it's not Donald Trump, it's not Michael Saylor, it's that little voice inside our head that casts doubt. We can flip the script on that voice and leverage it to be our biggest cheerleader instead of our biggest critic, which oftentimes that voice tends to be. Yeah. So, use that round of applause to take the criticism. All right, so teaching people about crypto, teaching people about Bitcoin, and the first thing that people say is, well, what if the internet goes down? And I would encourage people too to step into a place of empowerment. For people that have that as the number one reason why they're not leveraging this empowering technology that is decentralized cryptocurrency, for folks that are genuinely concerned that the beast system is so powerful that it could shut down the internet to prevent us from trading amongst ourselves, wouldn't the natural next step be to work on decentralized internet communication platforms? Right? Like, if you genuinely think they're going to shut the internet down, why not? You don't stop at that excuse. You say, well, what can I do to help do that? But a lot of people are disempowered. A lot of people are stuck in a reactionary paradigm. A lot of people are afraid to get their feet wet and go build something or support people that are building something. So I really want to encourage people to do just that. And when we're doing activism to help onboard people, let's try to identify, and again, let's identify this within ourselves first and foremost, but let's try to identify like what's really holding this person back and how can we help bring those limiting beliefs out of them. All right, so the counter economy is a big piece of the Confederation of Freedom Communities. Identifying like-minded people, working with one another, hiring one another, trading amongst ourselves. You know, we recently bought a butchered cow, about a whole cow's worth of beef with Bitcoin, which was pretty cool. Although the transaction fee was really high. And the guy that we bought it from is a Bitcoin maximalist, so I don't even broach the topic of Monero, but I will next time and make that purchase. But still, it was pretty cool. We're decentralizing the food, we're decentralizing the money. And that's another thing that comes up. Well, if we use only cryptocurrency, what about the grocery stores? I'm sure you guys have heard this one time and time again. Well, that's why we need to have resilient food networks. That's a piece of this Confederation of Freedom Communities. Working with one another, hiring one another. My company, Livery Academy, we have like 18 or 20 full-time or part-time staff people, and every single one of them, but 2, I met through the Freedom Community and through the Freedom Cell Network, right? And so they don't have to worry about needing to take a shot or some BS mandate. We do require drug tests, though, when they get hired. And if they pass the drug test, they can't work with us, because that means they're square. Joking, not joking. No drug test. So that's a huge piece of it, the counter economics. But here's where we take things further. It's not just the counter economics, which obviously this conference is very concerned with, but it's also the other piece is land and community, like actual intentional community. So what we encourage people to do is to exit the cities, to buy land and build community in the country. We do a conference called the Exit and Build Land Summit, and we're about to have our 5th one. It's actually going to be at Joel Salatin's Polyface Farm. which has been a challenge too, because we railed so hard on Trump, and we did this campaign that was like vote for nobody, and I even put out like political attack ads against Trump, trying to help people recognize like it's Operation Warp Speed. Give me a break here. Now you're supporting this guy like he's God's gift to the freedom movement. But it was kind of, now I'm having to answer like, well, Joel Salatin's going to be appointed some advisor to the USDA. Don't you think you should have voted? Joel Salatin too isn't a politics guy. It's about taking responsibility. It's about leaving a legacy of liberty through the land, through the community that you build, through the impact that you leave on future generations. Anyway, land and community. If we really want to create freedom in the moment now, I highly, highly, highly recommend people considering getting out to the country. It's a totally different ball game living in a big city like Austin, for example, which is where I was born and raised, and living in a much smaller rural community like Bastrop, which is where we call home now. We have a 10-acre homestead, and we have a little mini intentional community. So there's 11 humans on the property. We got a good 8 ducks, maybe 15 or 18 chickens, and some gardens. We just dug out a giant pond that we're gonna build, and there's a food forest that's in production, and it's not in production, we're building it, and the food forest is gonna drain down into the pond. We got bees, all sorts of stuff. And so when I think about that, if shit hits the fan, it's not gonna be easy, obviously, but we got a freezer full of beef still. It's like all the crappy cuts, they're at the bottom of the freezer. So when shit hits the fan, we'll be doing a lot of roasts and tenderized beef cutlets, which is like mystery beef meat. Either way, it'll be great. We'll be eating like kings when the world's going to hell all around us. But I feel more comfortable because we have space, because we're not in the middle of all of the chaos when shit goes down. And it's not only just us on this homestead. In fact, one of the families that lived there, they just birthed their 3rd child. And she did a free birth in our guest house. No midwife, nothing whatsoever, which is pretty cool. So now we have an amenity for folks that live on the property. We have a birthing center on the property. But she had a nice pool and everything, or a little tub that she used. But the idea is to get together in community. And for those of you that are like, I love the city, like I do stuff with Tom Woods, who's a total badass, but he's like, John, I'm not moving out to the country. I love the city. I don't know if you guys follow him. He's always eating at a nice steakhouse. He's always going to the New York show with his family. He's got a good life, that guy. He's like, I'm not going out to the country, man. I love the city life. But I do want to encourage folks, and I was going to say, if you have the means. If you don't have the means, get the means. That's another limiting belief. How could I possibly afford land? I can barely pay rent, right? Well, Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So we just need to really believe in our ability to craft a life of our dreams. But if you're gonna stay in the city, I would highly advise at least get 2 acres outside of the city. And here's how community comes into play and strength in numbers. You can go in with a few people, everybody throws in 10K, 15K, and then you put the down payment. Or maybe if you got somebody that you can borrow the money from, or you could do DeFi against all your crypto gains. I've been doing decentralized finance for a while now, using Compound, a DeFi app. Used it to pay to paint the house, for a down payment on our car, down payment on our solar system, to expand our office. And essentially you could take the gains that you've made with crypto, and when you borrow against your cryptocurrency, it's not a taxable event, which is pretty cool. But long story short, have a spot out in the country. And even if you don't live there full time, you can go on the weekends. It can be a little retreat. You can take the family down. You could go hunting or just go hang out around a fire and drink a 6-pack with a friend. But you post an RV there. You post a nice shed that's well sealed up, and you start stacking food supply and food storage there. I highly recommend it because when we identify areas that are going to be most impacted by this technocratic agenda, it's most definitely going to be these smart cities. Major cities are already so advanced when it comes to the surveillance, and then you got 5G interconnecting everything. It's called the Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies. This also goes back to all this carbon finance, tokenization. They're really trying to securitize everything on the planet. Bill Gates' Microsoft even has a planetary supercomputer, which the goal is to identify, catalog, and analyze every single bit of biodiversity on the planet, including human beings. So Get out to the country, escape the technocracy. There's a lot more freedom. There's people hunkering down. And if you don't necessarily do an intentional community, you can still connect with your neighbors in the area or connect with other freedom people. So this is, to take it a step further, the Confederation of Freedom Communities will have these nodes, and the nodes will be like-minded freedom communities, not just an actual intentional community where people live on the land cooperatively. It doesn't mean like a commune, by the way. You can still have private ownership and private agreements. We connect all these communities. We connect the folks that are living in the house or the apartment, but they're getting together regularly at the meetup. They're trading. They're hosting their own farmers markets and agoras. We have a big agora that's going to take place in Central Texas here pretty soon. And the woman that's doing it, she's going to start doing it every single month at different areas in Central Texas. So we connect this confederation. It's much like a network state. It's much, I love the parallel society thing, because we always talk about parallel economy. What about an entire parallel society? So we connect these communities, we trade amongst ourselves, we create our own alternative guidelines and rule systems. We go to one another in times of need. Ultimately, we defend one another from criminals, public and private alike. And that's the vision that I have for this Confederation of Freedom Communities. It's gonna take time piecemeal, but as on the individual level, we're decoupling ourselves through exit and build household strategies. So too, on a community level, are we decoupling ourselves from the beast system. Now, there's another piece of it that I want to share before I wrap up. And this is something that I was very skeptical of for my entire activist career ever since I heard about it. And that's this concept of sovereignty through law. That's what I define it. There's a lot of quackery in this space. Yeah. But then, come to find out, when it comes to law, when it comes to the commercial code, when it comes to the private realm versus the public realm, there's actually a whole lot of ground to be gained. Are you guys familiar with this concept of the private realm? So you have the public realm, which is law, ordinances. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not law. It's the legal world. Law is an entirely different thing. It's the legal world, it's the ordinances, it's the edicts, it's man-made law. And then you have the private realm, which is free people getting together, working together, trading amongst themselves. So every time you do a transaction with these vendors, they're not reporting it over to the capital, right? That's the cool thing about Mexico, the underground economy, the counter economy. It's not even a thing that they philosophize about. It's like, that's how we grew up. We're gonna report this, give me a break. And then they all look out for each other too. So when you make a transaction, like I bought a mead, it said 12% alcohol by volume, but a little bit more. I had two of them. Definitely more than 24%. Anyway, I had one of those and I was listening to Amir's talk, and it was like, I was feeling emotional just because he's such a revolutionary and the message was so potent and you could tell how passionate he was about it. And it also felt good for me because he shouted out freedom cells as this agorist thing, and I was like, wow, the work that we're doing is like people that really matter to me that are doing really cool shit. He recognizes how important this work is. Anyway, great mead, I highly recommend the guy there, pay with Monero. The transaction that you make when you're just paying someone privately, that's in the private realm. Two consenting adults doing business with one another outside the scope of the system. So, this private realm and sovereignty through law world, I believe, can act as a really powerful bridge between the statist economy, the public realm, and an agorist society, a free society outside the system. And so we recently linked up with this guy, his name's Bradley Logan, and we put on a free webinar. You can still sign up, livefree.academy/Trinity, livefree.academy/Trinity, and he posits that there's these three organizations. Instinctively, we would call them entities, but they're not legal entities at all. There's these three organizations that we can leverage in order to pursue our work, in order to further God's gifts that we've been given, in order to align with our divine purpose. And those three organizations are a non-statutory trust. So if you're familiar with the trust, you have trustees and a benefactor, but most of them are statutory. You file it, you go send it off to the state, Secretary of State, and then you go open a bank account, right? This is completely private. And it's not some weird, sketchy thing. It's actually has a whole lot of history in British common law. So a non-statutory trust, and the purpose of the non-statutory trust is to steward resources, like land, right? So we're actually leveraging this right now in order to shift our existing homestead and little intentional community and then acquire a larger piece of land so we can build a larger, bigger scale community, an eco-community with dozens of families living on the property. So you have a non-statutory trust that stewards resources. Maybe it's cryptocurrency, maybe it's a car, maybe it's a tractor, or it's a piece of land. Then you have a private membership association. You guys heard about a private membership association? So instead of having an LLC where you gotta go get permission from the man, and you gotta fill out a franchise tax report every damn year, which is a total pain in the ass, you have a private membership association where the people that you're working with, they're not your customers or your clients, they're members. And this too is enshrined in jurisprudence and court backing. It's as old as time, people getting together privately in fraternal organizations. The NAACP, for example, was a private membership association. So this is how the people interact with one another. This is how there's common guidelines and a system of governance and organization. And in the example of a community, the community members would all be members of the private membership association. Then to tie it all together, you start a church or a 508c1a. So in the tax code, if you're a church actually, there's a mandatory exception from the income tax. So what we came to realize was that a lot of the work that we're already doing is spiritual in nature. Whether you're Christian or Buddhist or whatever, or if you're completely atheist, I just hope that we don't lose sight of the fact that the folks that are in control of the government and the mega corporations, many of them are satanic, predatory, psychopathic pedophiles. And they do all sorts of weird shit in the woods, and they worship big Moloch owl statues, and there's like pentagrams in the Washington, D.C. outline of the city. And it's like some hardcore evil shit. There's evil stuff going on, and there's an energy with that evil. And so what we're doing, it may seem like practical, or we're trying to decentralize and all this stuff, but I see it as us doing God's work, as us aligning with our true divine purpose, that which lights us up inside, that which just magnifies our creative capacity as free, powerful, and beautiful human beings. And unfortunately, we've lost sight of that. So we started a church, it's called Freedom Family Fellowship. We get together regularly. We talk about Christ's teachings, we talk about the Buddha, we talk about aligning with our true purpose, overcoming limiting beliefs, mindset, and then we get together and work in the garden. And our creed is harmony with self, identifying our purpose and pursuing it with passion, overcoming our internal struggles that have held us back in the past, doing shadow work, recognizing that we're all hurt individuals, and the more hurt we are, the more we hurt other people. So that's the harmony with self. Then there's harmony with the land, permaculture, regenerative agriculture, going on walks, going on hikes, getting our hands dirty. And then there's harmony with each other, building communities, relating to one another, nonviolent communication, right? And it's our belief when we have harmony in these three areas, then we're closer to God. So that's the church that we're putting forward. So we're going to be pushing forward our activism and our work through this Trinity model. And it's a bridge because when we're doing agorist stuff, under the table kind of deal, it's really hard to scale that because it's a challenge to steward resources. But if you have a non-statutory trust, we went into the bank account and set up a bank account without having anything filed. And they're like, well, we're gonna need to see the certificate of formation. That's if we do an LLC, a little certificate of formation, the state of Texas stamped on it. I'm like, there is no certificate of formation. It's an unincorporated church. And the local bank was totally cool with it. So we now have that. And it's really exciting too, because it's not like, oh, this transaction or selling this Bitcoin or whatever. It's an exception from the IRS code. And I think that's really special. So a key piece of this Confederation of Freedom Communities will be helping to onboard people into the private realm. There's already many communities that are doing this. Our friends in Tennessee at Haven Earth, our good buddy Jonathan England down in Costa Rica. And it's my hope that by exiting and building, letting go of the politics, abandoning the reactionary paradigm that consumes us and puts us in a space where we're manifesting that which we oppose, the more that you focus on the New World Order, the more you'll see it in your lives, the more overwhelmed and anxious you'll be. the more you connect with other freedom lovers, the more that you get out from behind the computer and get your hands dirty in the garden, the more you'll see how truly free we are now in the present moment. So we exit and build. We recognize those internal limiting beliefs that are holding us back from taking our work to the next level. Or if you're somebody that's still trying to find your place in this movement, you recognize maybe I don't need to be so shy. Maybe I don't have to feel uncomfortable and insecure when striking up conversations with people. Maybe I'll go out on a limb and ask my Uber driver if they want to set up a cake wallet and accept a Monero tip, even though, I don't know, I might be a little uncomfortable or stumble over my words. We push through those limiting beliefs. We connect with one another on a deeper level. We trade with one another, we hire one another, we participate and grow the counter economy. Ultimately, we get the hell out of the city, even if you do the middle path. Eventually, I have a feeling you're going to want to escape to your little oasis that you got there on the outside of town. And we confederate, we collaborate, we connect with one another. And ultimately, we all recognize that there's a light within us that in many instances has been dimmed. And if we can reorient ourselves to the divinity, we're all God's children, there's something really special about that. If we can recognize that divine light and that creative capacity, I really believe that the future is bright. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here at this conference and be a part of this incredible movement that we all belong to. Thank you so much.